I think that we are ready. Okay, thanks everyone for being here, competing with the great weather, competing with everything else, and competing with an Sunday afternoon in Paris. I think that I'm really lucky to be here today. My name is CHRISTINA, MATEO, and I am the Associate Dean at IE School of Architecture and Design in IE University, which is a university in Madrid and Segovia, that's in Spain. But we are in an international institution, and I'm really glad to have here with me in the panel some of our alumni, and I would say that it's friends and family almost, because we have Bernard Darche. He is actually, he did, I would say, a bachelor in arts, but in economics and philosophy. And then he studied an MBA at IE School of Architecture at IE, and then a Master in Real Estate Development at the School of Architecture and Design. Then we have, he works in sustainability and consultancy, and he will have a lot to say about this conversation. Marta ORTIGOSA, she's a trained architect, and I think that this is important to have architects in these tables. And then she did a Master in Strategic Interior Design, and she's working as an architect right now. FATEMEH MONFARED, she's also a trained architect, but she's done work in the built environment, and also she's a metaverse architect. So we are really happy to have her here with us. And last but not least, we have Simone ABBOUD, who is alumni as well from the School of Architecture and Design. He is a technical architect, and he is now working in corporate strategy in real estate. So I'm thinking that I'm really lucky to have these experts here today and have you here. So we wanted to start asking the audience, just to wake things up a little bit, how many of you are architects, trained architects? Okay, we will go back to that. It's good to know. Okay, so we are going to be doing this quite in an interactive way, and hopefully we'll have time for you to have questions at the end, because I think that's what we want. And the subject and the topic that we decided that we wanted to kind of have you challenge with is the idea of metaverse cities, whether this is something more than what we can immediately think of, which is obviously the digital twins, and what does it mean, a metaverse city. We've been, probably you have also been in some of the panels before, and I think that we have a lot to discuss. So one of the things that I wanted to ask my panelists is, obviously, cities, physical cities, Paris, one of them, have issues, have problems. They have loss of traffic. In Paris, the 15-minute city by the mayor Anne Hidalgo is being implemented, not without challenges. But how do we actually translate that into the metaverse? Are any of these principles applicable? So the first thing that I would like to ask, and I would like to ask Simone, is, Simone, how do you see the idea of a metaverse city when we're thinking of cities which actually take a long time to build and a long time to become cities? Time is a factor.
And so it's a very good point, and for the architects in the room, we know that all of our cities, when they started, might start small, and relationship had to be created, and for Paris to actually get to where it is now, it took a couple of millennia. So I think this is something we might need to keep in mind for the broader community in general entering the metaverse concept, is that there is a big hype, a lot of hopes, but it requires time. And so obviously some of the big platforms have been there for quite a long time, in the metaverse that are big now, but it did take 13 years or more to get where it is, and then we'll need more and more of those trials to get to whatever we want it to become.
Thank you. Fatima, you are working. You've been working in both the physical environment and also the metaverse. How that quality of time and building a city throughout time with its people translate into the metaverse?
That's a great question. I think one thing that I would touch on that is what makes a city is actually its inhabitants, right? And as of right now, the metaverse is not populated at all because we have very limited amounts of users. And I think we're going to see that shift as we get more people getting into the metaverse and using it and experiencing it. When I first started working in the metaverse, I went into one called Decentraland, which is one of the most well-known metaverse platforms, and it was really empty and interactions were really hard to make. And in my definition of what a city is a place where people are interacting and doing activities like, for example, shopping or hanging out with friends or watching a concert. All of these things can be done in the metaverse, but as of right now, we don't have enough users to see how those interactions translate to the metaverse. So I would say that that's the shift between the physical and the digital, and the lack between that I would see is the lack of users that we have. And I think that one of the things we should be working on more is working on the collaboration of the physical and the digital, rather than thinking of cities as the physical that we have and the metaverse as being just the digital. We can enhance our physical with the metaverse through augmented reality, and we have metaverse platforms that have also been talking here. We have Over, we have Superworlds. These are both metaverse platforms that are enhancing our physical through augmented reality. And at the same time, we have the virtual platforms that can enhance the physical. We have NVIDIA that is building Omniverse, which is a platform that I call it the future of BIM technology. We can use this platform. Architects, engineers, and designers can collaborate together in real life, in real time, and build and test out physical buildings that we're going to do in the real world in the metaverse. So I think that's another example to look at.
Excellent. Which actually brings us to the question, what is a city? Maybe when we think of cities in the metaverse, we need to reevaluate, just as we are reevaluating everything in the metaverse, right? So Marta, you are working every day in the built environment. What it is a city for you in the metaverse? Is it something different?
For me, like, we are using the term city because at the end of the day is when we blend all the activities that we do in our daily life. And then I think a big part of the city is the common space, and that will be like a huge point to achieve in the metaverse, as you don't need to go from point A to point B. You can teletransportate yourself, so you don't really need to go through common space. And I think we need to create some sort of common evenemential space that can attract city, because city at the end of the day is a lot about people interaction, people to interact, next to encounter and create serendipitous encounters, and then later on give you possibilities. Because if not, we are all in our little square of the land, we will be just with people that is similar to us, and we will be losing a lot of opportunities for the society.
Yeah, we want people to mix, and we want diversity. And Bernard, you are working as a consultant in sustainability, social inclusion, the aspect of the social aspect is a strong one in when you look at sustainability. How does that translate, or you think that translates into the metaverse, beyond thinking of data centers and so on?
Yeah, no, of course. And I think, it's a very good point. When we talk about sustainability in general, we're talking about the environment, the social, and the governance. And I think that, metaverse cities have a potential of really advocating and helping us solve quite important challenges that we're facing from a social perspective, especially nowadays. I think it's important that, as we said, is that we try to imagine those metaverse cities as not utilitarian, but more as, how can we promote some sort of serendipity within them? How can we create spaces that allow for people to interact and, meet, just we would be able to meet in the physical world, and allow to bridge the difference of travel, the distances, and I think this is really, really important.
We have examples of so-called metaverse cities, or at least they are actually called like that, and we have some examples like Neom comes to mind. Seoul, the capital of South Korea. where there is a degree of civil servant sort of approach for the citizens to have a better experience and to be having more agency. And of course, we also have, because there are many architects, I can mention Liverland from, Zaha Hadid Architects, which is more like a speculative approach, perhaps, to what architects can actually do. Those are maybe different notions between, the three of them, the three. So clearly there is not an agreement, perhaps, or a consensus of what a city is, and yet we are using the same name that we use in the physical realm. But so taking license from that, commonality of name, how would you define what is actually the urban experience? What to you would be? Just a quick round for each of you, maybe one or two words. What is actually the definition of the urban experience in the physical world? And maybe we can then think about how that translates into the metaverse.
It's a very good point, and I think I love this idea of deconstructing what the word is, because at the end of the day, it's simply a word. So I think what's very important in cities, you can divide into 4 things. It's a place where through interaction you can live, work, play, and connect. If you're able to connect those 4, and obviously for personal purposes, but cities won't be working without business purposes, so it has to make business sense, to create some kind of a real dynamic. So those 4 would be the 4.
Okay, Fatima.
Yeah, I can totally agree with that, and I think that's essentially what a city is. We use those spaces to connect, live, and work. What was the 4th one that you mentioned?
Live, work, play, connect.
Oh, play. I forgot the play one. I think that's really boils down to what a city is, and I think examples of cities. I think, for example, Decentraland and Sandbox, which are metaverses that work on an open map, they're cities as well. Over in Super Wars, they're also cities. They're an augmented layer of our physical cities. So I would consider them as cities more than I would, for example, Neom or Liberland or these examples that we were talking about, because they're really enhancing the experiences that we're having, and they're really making those connections and where we can live, connect, play. I can't remember those 4. But yeah, I think those are really great examples of a city, and I've seen interactions like that happen. Where we were just chatting earlier on, and I mentioned that I had a friend who went into this spatial penthouse with Exclusible, and I had a friend who went into the jacuzzi just to chill with his avatar, and he met another architect there, and they started chatting, and they connected, and then they connected in the physical world, and they're doing a project together now. That's really an example of what's possible in the metaverse, and that was just someone who are miles away from each other, just connected in a virtual space, and they're doing something physical together.
Maybe that's an idea also for the physical environment, to meet in jacuzzis for business opportunities. I leave it there. Marta, how about you?
So for me, the city is the bigger structure that englobes all the activities that Simon said, and kind of put them in relation with one another, so we can have a global experience. We don't do one and then the other.
And maybe just to summarize, I think because I think we all agree what cities are. I think what really an important component of what cities are, and how they're defined, is about the mixity of all of the different 4 uses that we've imagined, but also the different ways of approaching each one of them.
Okay, great. Obviously, there was a panel before as well, but real estate, it's part of city making, and it's something which now many companies are actually looking at as a way of developing business in the metaverse. I don't want to kind of focus on that too much, because we've already said that cities is much more than that. But there is a huge attraction to investing money in buying land in the metaverse. And I'm just wondering what's your view of that in regards this idea of city making. Is that something that can contribute at all to a different notion of city making, or what's your view? Just maybe, Simon, tell me.
What I would say is that what we should definitely not keep out of the scope is the fact that, I think this panel is perfect for that, because cities are made by different stakeholders. So as you know, I think there is a panel on the 20th of July, and I think if anything, this is the one that really struck my eyes because it was a public-private discussion about the metaverse with the Minister of Interior from France. I think this is exactly what we need, because fair enough that I mean I'm not going to be too much on that, but we're talking about the future of cities. Everyone needs to be engaged because now it's maybe focused mostly on few use cases. But if we were saying that the future, this whole metaverse concept is basically the next internet. Basically, it's a platform. It's an ecosystem where we'll be having hundreds of millions of people going on. So everyone has to be now engaged because we don't want to do the same mistake that we've done with real cities, which is basically now, we have ESG consultant here. He has a ton of work because, well, we need to actually recycle all the cities that we've built to actually be responsible moving forward. And I think this is exactly the point: is how can we think responsibly to have a more sustainable future.
That's great, yeah. Could you repeat the question again? Sorry. I'm trying to think about...
If we think of real estate and the investment that is actually required, or acquired, it's been implemented in the metaverse, what does that say about city making, the notion of city making in the metaverse? There's a lot of money being invested. How do you actually relate that to this notion of city making in the metaverse?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really tough one, honestly. I don't know how those two concepts would relate to each other, because real estate and buying land in the metaverse and building cities, I don't know if they're related. And
maybe they are not. Maybe what you're saying is that they are not.
Yeah, probably I would say that they're not, because also we were talking about this, that most of the cities that were virtual cities that we're seeing, the way that they're structured and the way that the real estate is structured is not very sustainable as well. Because, for example, in the urban landscape of it, in the central line, you have a lot of parcels that are not even connected to ways that you would be able to get into it. So it's just teletransporting into those parcels. So I think that city building and virtual real estate are not really connected as we're seeing it so far. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to ask Marta exactly about what you just kind of mentioned, because I think that is a very interesting thing to, maybe there is an assumption that because they are like plots of land, maybe that becomes Seoul, I don't know, or that becomes, I don't know, Madrid. But city making or actual cities is much more than that. And we'll go back to the digital twins in a minute. So Marta, as a trained architect and somebody who actually knows a lot about the built environment, how would you actually define, or how does this idea of plotting, next or plots next to each other have, that's actually like a bad experience, a bad sort of urban experience?
Yeah, like, I think in a way, all this land rush is repeating patterns we already have in the physical world, and people is really buying land, expecting the metaverse to become like a replica of the physical world, and I really think it has the potential to be much more than that. And then about city making, I think it's been proven that the cities that work less are the ones that which common space doesn't work. And if we see like there is a lot of architects in this room, and if you see like all the squares and all the little streets, like that's not a city, like at least for me, that's not a city, that's like an addition on different plots. So I really think we architects need to be in the conversation and need to start thinking what is a city in the metaverse, how we zone the city in the metaverse in order to develop it, and for it not just to be like addition of little squares, same measure.
Bernard, you want to add anything to that?
Yes, really quickly. Maybe what I would like to add is just the way that I see this metaverse cities to be as research and development playground for what happens out here in the real world to a certain extent. We're facing a lot of different challenges here, and I think there's a great opportunity to be able to invent the cities of tomorrow in a digital space where we can learn and extract some key learning experiences that we can then replicate here. And I think, when we're talking about what these cities in the metaverse look like, we need to also be thinking about what these cities in the metaverse look like and what we can learn from, so that we can then try to solve some of the issues here.
Any examples, anyone, of maybe a different notion of not the classical notion of a city that we've been mentioning, like Neom or Seoul? Any examples of what it could be a good example, a good reference in the metaverse of a city, or a new notion of a city? I think that, Fatima, you were talking about something when we were kind of warming up. You mentioned one or two examples. You want to?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the ones that I talked to you about was Walt Hill, which is a metaverse that they're working with architects to build it out, and I think that's really cool. And that's something that I felt lacking in the space as well when we were building metaverse platforms and building the map of it and creating what interactions would happen on top of that. Usually at that early stage, we don't have architects involved in the decision making, and I think that's a huge mistake. I personally think that we can, as architects, bring a lot of value at that early stage and not just when the lands are live and then building separated, isolated experiences on top of them. I think within the city planning and creating those interactions of that, we can bring more value. And Walt Hill is doing that. They're involving architects in creating the map of the world that they're putting out, and I thought that was really interesting. So that's a great example of how cities and the metaverse can connect.
Okay, let's go back a little bit about the title. It was about more than digital twins. So is there any value in recreating cities as digital twins? Is anyone considers that there is any value? Marta?
Yeah, I think there is a value because if you think about some years ago, each city was trying to be an smart cities, and smart cities are based in data collection and predictability, and you can do that in the metaverse to a new level. But again, I think even though we can do that, maybe like the metaverse that are linked to governments or to countries can explore that. I think we need another metaverse that it's not like some sort of laboratory for the physical world.
I like that. So maybe we need, I think that you were alluding to that as well, Bernard, to some sort of concept to think of what it is actually, what's the concept of cities in the metaverse? Are they on research and development? Where are they?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, when we think about metaverse cities, I think there was two different approaches. Is that this one where we use augmented reality to be able to augment the way that we're going to experience Paris, Rome, Madrid, and so on. And then there's going to be the cities that are going to be built from scratch. And I think out of these two, this is how we can try to best explore the world of possibilities that this boundaries of what we can explore is coming to be.
Fatima, you were talking before about having, plots of land next to each other and having to move almost like using a teletransporter. How would you say, that ideally a city that actually works in the metaverse will have to kind of have the type of, or what would be the type of mobility that a city that works in the metaverse should have?
I think that's a fantastic question, and one that I've been thinking about constantly because, walking in the metaverse, does that even make sense? How are the ways that we're moving right now in the world, right? We're walking, we're using public transportation, we're kind of really grounded, of course, and I think that really doesn't make sense in the metaverse. So I've been constantly thinking about that, and we did this project. It was a concert and festival space in the Sandbox, and one of the things we thought about was how are we going to get people to move from one stage to another that is more interactive? So we decided to build these tunnels that are like slides that connect these different stages, and you just float through it and you're plunged into different stages and you can literally fly and do different things. So I think we should really experiment that and push it forward. This was really an experimental project, so we were just trying to figure out what are the new ways of moving within the metaverse, and I think we need to look into that further. For example, when I'm walking around in the Centraland, I'm super bored. I don't want to be doing that, And they have some devices like trains that you can hop on and everything, but still, I don't think that's the best way to move in the metaverse. I think there's still a lot of room for innovation on that side. It's something that I'm really looking forward to finding out what are the possibilities and exploring that further, and a great question. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the idea of interaction, which you've all touched upon. How do we do that in the metaverse? Because we talk about common spaces, which could be public or perhaps private, and the idea of third spaces come to mind. Spaces where people feel at home. They are actually not challenging. They make you want to go back, and that appeals to an idea of community building. So how, or give me some examples perhaps that you know of, how that's actually working in the metaverse. How do we build community in the metaverse?
Okay, that's a good one. So what I'm gonna say, how to build community in the metaverse, we need to just make sure that first it's available to everyone. I think, I'm not an expert on the metaverse per se, but I can say that, a lot of people like me are seeing so many barriers to entry to just understand what it is. And I think this is the first, just for people our age, this is one thing, and then people that are a bit older, I think this is definitely a big change. I mean, you're talking about critical mass and how we can really leverage the full benefits of such a platform. It's with accessibility to everyone. And I think the second big piece is, personally, is how we were saying that so cities are made by humans for humans. Human centricity is at the core of everything. And I think, as we're talking about, how would mobility evolve? How should, let's say, a platform like Sandbox evolve? Because obviously there'll be a million other platforms. Should be coming through surveying two things. First, how, just like, in our case, we're building and managing buildings in real life, is by putting sensors. So by implementing and analyzing quantitative data. So how many people are actually moving through your plots or whatever. And second is asking the users, what do you think? What do you want to actually happen on this plot or in this thing? So I think those two are our big ones. And sorry if I'm deriving from the initial question.
Okay, so Fatima, let's do a quick round. What's your view?
Perfect. Yeah, I totally agree with you, and that was a great answer. I think that communities are a big part of cities as well, and bringing those communities to the metaverse is essential. And one of the biggest barriers for that happening right now is that it's not accessible. The metaverse is, as of right now, we have a lot of difficulties, so most of them you need to download applications to get to it. And I mean, Spatial is a really good metaverse platform for that. We talked about it as well, because you can access it through your mobile phone, through an application. You can access it through a web browser and also through VR. So I think creating that accessibility and bringing down barriers to entry is what's going to bring mass adoption, and it's really going to create that sense of community. But on the other side, I would say that isolated experiences have been really great for creating community in the metaverse. So you have events that are happening, especially through cultural incentives, for example, concerts, festivals, things that are related to things that we would want to experience in the real world. So bringing that to the metaverse can really create community. For example, people who like to listen to a certain type of music but gather together and create that sense of community going to those virtual concerts, or people that have same kind of interests in art would go to a certain art gallery in the metaverse and connect through that. So I think hitting that cultural experience would be a great way to create community.
Marta, how about you?
Yeah, for me, the creation of community is very linked to the third space, as you were saying, and I really believe in Metaverse we need to have like some space that is public or shared by everyone, so everyone can access this space, because maybe we think everyone can go to a concert, but not everyone can go or pay to go to a concert, and so that will left some people behind. And I really think in this common public space is where serendipity encounter that you were saying before are going to happen. And maybe you are someone that doesn't know anything and is there where you are going to cross a field and you will maybe start a chat that will let you to improve your life, because the CEO is not going to come to the same party as you to offer you the opportunity of your life.
So the serendipity of the physical encounter cannot be maybe emulated.
Yeah, and giving like that we need to have a space that everyone needs to use, everyone wants to use, so we can like mix people of different backgrounds, and that's how you create a city. And as it will be public, it will be designed or by the DAO that owns the metaverse, or like through collaborative design. And when people is involved in the design process is when they feel like they are part of it. And that's what really creates community for me, like something that you own and no one can take of you, and you share with all these other people.
Totally agree, and I call them the in-between spaces.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have to build those.
Bernard, any addition to this idea of?
No, I think I fully agree with Marta. I think it's important that we are capable of making sure that the people that go to a concert can also meet the people that are going to a virtual art exhibition, and that we don't use the Metaverse cities just as utilitarian, as I said at the beginning. For me, going for one particular experience, but having the possibility of jumping from experience to experience. This is what makes cities like Paris, which is hosting us today, so great. And we need to be able to refine and redefine. And I think the design process in which we integrate the end users into what does the Metaverse city look like is super, super important. And it goes back to the concept of inclusivity, where you will be able to recreate all of these essentials of what makes successful cities today.
And I think that one thing that is actually flying around is the role of architects as agents of change in this process as well, and in being involved in. So these discussions that we are having, can be somehow maybe repaired or taken into account. So I wanted to open the questions to the audience because we have 2 or 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm an architect too, and as you know, in the architecture world, we have neighbors, we have well, we have Fitwell, and these certifications, in a way, allowed us to certify that buildings are sustainable, that buildings are actually measured and designed for the good of the humans. And I have searched in many ways how can we actually apply this to the metaverse environments, because I don't know if you guys have been in any of these interfaces when you jump in and you see like the stairs are completely distorted, the way that you transition to one space architecturally speaking to another one is entirely different, and the amount of considerations in terms of, I don't know, music, transitions, UX, amount of many design elements that comes, they all need to be measured in a way that we can say, okay, that space actually is helping an user. So what do you think how that could be applied in the future for us as architects to come and design these spaces and have some sort of guidance of things, how things should be considered?
Well, right now, there is a Metaverse Standards Forum that is forming, and I think that this is going to, I think that's going to be more on the technical side, but I think there's going to be something like that for the design side of things and the user experience as well, where we have some standards that we would have to follow of how we build within the metaverse. Right now, it's the Wild West, and there's no rules. There's no one guiding you on what to do and how to build. And I think there's going to be people that are creating those standards and guiding us with regulations, not in a way that we have in the physical world, but regulations that are more adjusted to the virtual world. Yeah.
That's a very good point, and maybe I'll just add that I think the beauty of the metaverse is the fact that in our case you're building real buildings. They don't work well. A lot of our offices, some of our clients are Microsoft, Google, etc. You realize that for the past 30 years, 30% of your space is unused, which is such a huge problem. So basically, the idea is in here you're able to directly test and measure how many people are using your space and how. And I guess the second piece is if it doesn't work out, well, redesign and re-implement. And I think this test reiterating blah 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 actually works very well. And the second piece is also, to your point, is it helping you? Asking the question. Yeah.
Any other questions?
I can just scream. So I'm actually working on a project for the city of Las Vegas because they're trying to join the metaverse as well. And I think, because you probably know that Decentraland has like a little Vegas city. But the thing is, the city of Las Vegas itself is built on tourism. They need people to actually go and stay at the hotel and attend concerts live. So how would a metaverse version of Vegas benefit your original city? Do you have any advice?
It's a great question. How would the metaverse version of Las Vegas help the physical city, right? I think that would be a question for metaverses that are working with augmented reality. I think that could be a really great way of enhancing the physical experience with using the metaverse. That would be one way that I'd go about it, and as well in terms of marketing as well. So advertising and things like that in the metaverse. You have Vegas Plaza in the Central End that you mentioned, and that's really a huge help for advertising and advocating for the city and people to come and see it. I know that there are people who are actually using the metaverse to bring tourism to the city and using it as a marketing strategy. So that would be one way to go about it as well, using not augmented reality metaverses for that.
I was going to say something a bit more radical, which is maybe there is a positioning issue as well. Maybe there are certain stereotypes which maybe actually are to be consolidated, or maybe there is a little shift about the positioning of the city, and that maybe the metaverse can be quite useful for that. So I would perhaps explore that. We have time for one final question. The important one, the closing one.
Thank you. I'm also an architect as well, and I just have a point and a question. In a lot of our cities, a lot of the most famous cities, let's say, they've been conquered. They've had issues happen. They've had constraints, and out of that is born some of the best cities on the planet. You know, through those constraints, there's found positive, and within the metaverse, there's you've mentioned as well that we're able to sort of perfect. We're able to take things that are wrong and perfect them. And we're able to have the beauty we say with architecture in the metaverse, that we don't have limitations. Should there be an element of limitation? Should there be an element of keeping things that have gone wrong, keeping a history, a track in some form? And what would those limitations be?
It's a very good question. I never thought about this, but I think, yeah, maybe someone from the other panel will be able to. Yeah.
I actually think that really brings me to the question we had earlier, and I think that I don't like to have limitations. That's why I work in Web3. So I think that, but having some standards more than limitations really helps. So right now, most of the experiences that we're having in the metaverse, as you mentioned, are not working. You have stairs that are not accessible. You have things that are just not making sense, and experiences that are not working properly. So having some sort of standards and guidelines of building within the metaverse and creating those experiences, I think could really help to have the metaverse functioning better and those experiences going better. So, and we're seeing that happen. A lot of platforms are working on that. For example, most of them have builder guidelines, PDFs and guidelines and AMAs that they do with creators, where they're showing you and they're teaching you what are the best ways to import your models in the metaverse platform, for example, or optimize your polycounts and things like that. So I think that's really great to have.
Okay, I will add to that. What you were telling about history constraints, I think right now we are really at the beginning of it, but I think in 20, 50 years, I can really see a DAO that will protect the first building that was built there, and when someone needs to put it out, they will vote, no, you can't, as is happened right now when we try to do gentrification. So I really think, in a way, we are human and we are attached to things at the end of the day. So I think right now, yes, we are letting everything because there is a lot of space and it's just the beginning, but I think we are going to face some problems that we already have in the physical world, in the metaverse too.
Okay, well, I think that's all we have time. If you are architects and are working in, in the metaverse, that's great because you have to be there and you have to be talking in these type of events. We want you to be at the right tables, and that means, to become agents of change, as I said before. And that's what we wanted to do today, to kind of open up a debate, which sometimes, is not where the architects are. So glad to hear that many of you are architects and are working, hopefully, in the metaverse, or you will. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, you can just leave them on the chairs.